Greetings, nerds. This is SNN Nerd. I'm your host, Sarah Belmont. And with me, as always, is our Mr. Producer, Will Polk. How are you doing tonight, Will?
I'm doing very well, Sarah. I avoided the State of the Union, so I think that's always a good thing. So for my mental health, so I'm doing very well.
Yeah, if only you could have avoided the Superbowl this weekend too, right?
Yeah. Oh gosh, yeah. Twitter was more fun than the Super Bowl, I have to say. Just seeing people comment about the Super Bowl. But I will say, the NFL 100 ad was like the best ad of the night. I mean, everything about it was just awesome. And I definitely have that thing on a loop. But the rest of it was like, that's 4 hours I can't get back.
And returning from her multiple trips to Kodiak is Miss Patricia Miller. How are you doing tonight, Patricia?
I'm doing good, and I'm happy I didn't waste 4 hours of my life watching the Super Bowl.
Me too. Because if the Patriots are in the Super Bowl,
but Sarah
we all know how it will end.
Yeah, see, Sarah's just trying to play all cool here, y'all. She was actually like lurking in the background there. She probably had it up on one of her streaming services and just kind of like, she had one eye on it. Just don't let her fool you.
I had one eye on Twitter.
Yeah.
One eye on Twitter, and then I worked out for the first half of the game, so I was out of sight, out of mind. And I was really anxious to see if, I would see the Rams leading by 20 points. Yeah, I didn't see that when I went back on Twitter.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm actually very much a sports person. Part of the reason, but I also, because I don't own a TV and cable and all of that, I don't like streaming sports. I also know that if I go home and watch the Super Bowl with my parents or watch any game with my parents, I suddenly realize why I shouldn't watch sports, because it gives me stomach aches. Because suddenly I'm watching and I'm like, okay, they have to win. Yeah. Oh my God, what the heck was that? I get so emotionally invested in it. It's bad, Will. Yeah. It's very bad. I shouldn't.
Yeah, see, okay, yeah, we need to watch a game sometime together then, because it'll be a lot of fun.
It's like I don't even know them, and I'm sitting here like it's a life or death situation.
I just want to see you like fully emotionally invested in a game that has stakes, and like instead of a TV show that doesn't have stakes, and I would just love it. I would love to see that.
Oh, it's pretty funny because I will literally get up and be like, Brady, get on your ass. That's right. Like I will totally talk smack and everything. And part of it is because just my family, we always grew up watching football. Before I moved, me and my dad, we would take the full lineup of all the games and make predictions every Sunday of like who's going to win what games. Mm-hmm. And we had no idea what we were talking about. It's not fantasy football, but we were like, we're going to do this. And then it was more about like being right versus anything. But enough about that, because I'm kind of offended, Will. I'm kind of offended that you said that ad, the NFL 100, was the best ad when the Avengers Endgame dropped some new footage.
Yes, it did. And I love that ad. But the NFL one was better.
Patricia, did you watch the tease for Avengers Endgame?
I did, but the sad thing is I haven't watched Avengers Infinity War. Mm-hmm. I haven't watched that one. I've been a really terrible nerd lately, I have to admit. It's my confession. Okay. So, no, I thought it looked cool, but it didn't give much information. Mm-hmm. And then I saw a post on Facebook like a day later. And have you guys watched the cartoon show called Atlantis, the movie? Where there was a meme of the guy from this thing, and it's like, okay, sound off, who's not dead? And it was like, the Avengers Endgame, this is basically what it's going to be, sound off, who's not dead? And I was like, oh, okay. but I don't understand what's going on. So
I don't understand that meme, but
I'll have to send it to you so that way it's a little bit more understood.
Yeah, send that. Yeah, I like to see. Yeah, send it to us so we can share it with everyone.
Okay. But yeah. So
okay.
Yeah.
I thought the clip or the Miss Marvel commercial looked pretty cool. At least graphically anyway.
Yeah. See.
Oh, did I hit a nerve?
No. See, Sarah and
I hit a nerve.
No, actually.
It's such a dad move. I'm sorry. Continue, Will.
No. It's a continuation of. I did that because I was thinking about our conversations. I think either last show or the show before last about how underwhelming the MCU trailers have been, and so when Patricia said that, I just thought about, I mean, Captain Marvel. These trailers don't excite me for that film, even though I want to see it. But it's not like I am just, the vibe is not there like the build up it was for like Black Panther or even Infinity War. It's just okay. This is cool, but okay, this is cool.
So
it looked like they did so much with it. Like, I don't know. Like, it's gonna be multiple movies. Like, for whatever reason, I just see her changing into from all these different time zones thing, and I was like, oh, that's gonna be way too much to keep up with.
Mm-hmm.
But that was like my initial thought. Again, I've been a terrible nerd, so I don't really know what's going on.
I've been a terrible nerd because I didn't even watch the Captain Marvel stuff. Because I don't really care at this point. For me, I think it's I started laughing, Patricia, because I thought that was such a unique response, because no, you haven't seen Avengers, so why would you be hyped about Endgame where you don't even know when the game started? But Captain Marvel,
Yep.
who's coming and is essential to Endgame, or so we believe, you're more interested in that because that's an origin story and she hasn't had any screen time yet. So I think that's really a genuine response. And for me, I'm like, part of the reason why I didn't watch the Captain Marvel tease is because I've already seen way too much footage. I'm going into that movie with Aquaman level expectations. And for me, that doesn't mean good, everybody, just to clarify, but if you're a listener, you know how I feel about Aquaman. Mm-hmm. However, I'm going into Avengers Endgame kind of like, I just want to get there. I need to know what happens because I'm so invested in this. And this tease is perfect. I don't need any more footage. I don't want any more footage. I am so glad it focused on Cap. I'm so glad it showed him at that support group. The image of the poster alone, that is so The Leftovers. And we all know The Leftovers is one of my favorite series. If you haven't watched it, watch it before Endgame, because it is very parallel to what's going on. And it's, again, we talk about grounding these characters. A guy snapped his fingers and half of the population is dead. Well, of course they're going to make support groups. Nobody knows what the heck is going on, guys.
Yeah.
And it's just the visuals, a part of me is really wondering if they're going to wait to kill Tony in the like final sequence of the film, or if they're going to kill him early on. And if we're really majority, if they're going to do time travel, are we just going to see Tony from the past and in the future he's already dead? I'm so intrigued. I'm so intrigued about finishing these arcs. And there's been so much rumors about what else is in store in this movie, and I'm so glad that I haven't seen it, because it's all still just rumors, and I want to be surprised.
I that you just really captured what I was feeling, Sarah. I mean, as far as that trailer, and yeah, I mean, as I said, it was one of my after the NFL one. It was my favorite one of the night, and it was just enough just to get it for me. It touched the emotional beats that the first one did not, and just a smaller, instead of I think it was just smart. It was only like 30 seconds or so, but it, instead of the long 2.5 minute one that first dropped, that was big and expansive and heartless, versus this one that had heart, because like you said, it started with Cap and that poster and this, seeing Rocket show up in the costume, and I mean, all those little things really got it. Now it's gotten me excited to see Endgame, whereas before I was like, don't show me anymore. I'm excited. Just get this April, get here.
Yeah. No, I'm right there. And the sad part about saying that is, like, we don't care about March, and March is when Miss Marvel drops. So it's a very interesting thing to know that there are people like Patricia.
Yep.
I'm sorry I had to say it that way. It's so funny. Who are so naive. No.
Nope, it's true.
But those, you guys are going to be the ones who go and watch Miss Marvel and be blown away, and maybe that'll excite you for Endgame, even if you haven't seen Infinity War and you're like, well, she's going to be in that movie, so I want my ticket too. So who knows? Marvel's going to have another winning year. I have no doubt about that. And it's also interesting because as much as Endgame is an ending, I don't feel sad, because I know that there's going to be continuation, and that also excites me. Like, where do they go from here? What do they tease next? Right.
Yeah, because I think it's my understanding that after Endgame, there is no more phases. I think they will end the fourth phase, and then I think the sky's the limit, because they got Spider-Man Homecoming, we have Black Widow, we have Captain Marvel, and Doctor Strange, I think 2 is going to be made, Black Panther 2. So all these events that have led to this moment in Endgame will be wrapped up, and then boom, they can just go and do standalones, or they can continue this keep expanding this universe.
Yeah. All right. So Arrow turned the big 150 episodes, 7 seasons, 7.5, I guess.
Yeah.
I was really bored by this episode, Emerald Archer.
Really?
I was really bored.
I really liked it, but it's funny. One of our followers on Twitter, Betty Taylor, she like sent a message to our account last night, and she just said that it was a lot of talking and not much else. But see, I really like this episode.
Why?
I think I think it's because, one, I just like the documentary style. The way it started out, because you had the Warner Brothers logo, and the entrance of the video with the the still shot documentaries, and Kelsey Grammer narrating, and it was a nice change of pace, and I could see how folks either are like me, where you like it or you don't. It either works for you or it doesn't, and it worked for me. And it really set up a good narrative structure for the entire episode, especially as the episode progresses, to get us back to what a lot of people and about the series, which is the core characters, Oliver, Diggle, and Felicity, doing what they do. And so by having the overarching theme of this documentary, and doing the featurettes with other vigilantes, and probably the funniest and most Barry Allen the Barry that we all know and love show up in this episode. The adorable Barry. All those things really worked for me, and I just really found myself very engaged with this episode this week.
Yeah, I think I would have appreciated it more had I not been told, hey, the 150 episode of Arrow is going to be documentary style. Kelsey Grammer is going to narrate. If like the first act, I would have been like, wait, what's going on? Oh, this is really interesting. But I already knew. And yeah. I agree. It was a good narrative structure. I also just was bored because, and I think I've brought this up in previous episodes, that sometimes Arrow reverts to circle back to themes and discussions that have been occurring on this show since episode 1.
Yeah.
And I understand the narrative structure. They put a twist on that, and that's fine. I just was bored. You start off interviewing Quentin Lance. That threw me because I'm like, he's dead. Oh, this is 2014. Okay, why is that important? Why do I care? Also, the interview with Sarah is the one that stuck out to me the most. Mm-hmm. I just didn't understand why they would interview her, because also Sarah died in real life and then was brought back to life.
Right.
And it's very confusing how the documentary's interviewing people, putting their vigilante names out there too. And I'm kind of like, why is everybody being exposed, or what's happening here? There's also a clear editing error, in my opinion. They showed the interview with Curtis, and then the next scene, they show Curtis come and give the team information and then being startled by the cameras. Bad editing choice. I'm sorry.
That's a good point. That is a good point. And I don't know if it was either editing error, or maybe it was just, I think, yeah, you're right. It was the continuity error. I can't really explain why they would do it that way, because the way the interviews were being structured and rolled out at that point, it wouldn't make sense for him to be all startled or blurt out and just confidential information if he knows now that these camera people are here, and there's certain things of Argus, not talk about the black satellites and that kind of stuff, and those kind of things. So, yeah, I think that was definitely a continuity error that they made in editing the show together. Maybe it was intentional. We shall see. But
maybe but Oliver did deliver a line for one of the first few times where I thought of the line right before he said it, when Curtis is kind of like, how do you know about those black sites? And Oliver looks at him and is like, have you met my wife?
Yeah.
I thought of that exact same thing. I'm like, why are you questioning this, Curtis?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like I said, it definitely works. There was, thinking back to Sarah Lance's interview, and also just these folks outing themselves as vigilantes. You have to remember, at this point in Star City, you have the Anti-Vigilante Act in place. So, and we pretty much, with the exception of Dinah, all original Team Arrow and new Team Arrow were exposed in the FBI deal. So they're already all out. Oliver now is obviously all out. Speaking of OTA, NTA, I love the little dig they threw in there with Renee and Oliver whenever they mentioned the was it new GA?
Yeah, new GA.
Yeah, NGA. I think it was what. NGA. Yeah. So that was a little. I think Mark Guggenheim having a little dig at the fandom there for a bit, but I digress. I think the people being out like that was necessary, because I think this documentary at its core was essentially extolling the virtues or the negatives of a city utilizing vigilantes to deal with the crime problem. And so at this point in the era, in the continuity, everybody's, for the most part, with the exception of Barry in this episode, were out. And so it made sense for them to all basically give their identities in this documentary.
Right. That's a fair point. I also found that the Williams stuff, I think the Williams stuff is supposed to set us up for a bigger confrontation next week, with the Star City Slayer, this serial killer that's coming, which I think might be after specifically children. But I also felt like, if you're going to take the 150th episode and really want to do this whole narrative spin on it, then commit. You don't have to add in all of these other subplots. You can put those on hold and save them for a real cohesive story next episode.
Yeah.
And so, because it kind of, what I found is, you had the big confrontation with Felicity and William, and then all of this stuff with Oliver, and then a little moment between Felicity and William at the end. And it's kind of like, that's a lot of space in between.
Yeah.
And very, very little resolve. I mean, Oliver, like, when is Oliver and Felicity going to talk about how, like, William's clearly blaming her for being sent away. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Where is that confrontation between her and Oliver on it? I mean, Oliver and her, I thought, talked about how he Christmas break wasn't coming soon enough. I'm just very confused as to who's mad at who for what.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I will agree with you that the Williams subplot in this episode probably could have waited. It did. The things that they brought up as far as everything from Felicity putting the spyware on his tablet, to him getting up with Renee's daughter, and setting the stage for the flash forwards that we've been watching so far this season, and as you mentioned, the confrontations between him and Felicity as far as feeling responsible for getting sent off to boarding school. All those things really could have waited for another episode. It just did throw off, given the vibe and the themes throughout this episode. It was out of place, the only other thing that might have worked a little bit was when Oliver, they had the reunion, and Oliver was happy to see him and everything, and the documentarians were filming all that, and Oliver was just did have a moment of like, no, keep him out of this thing, which made sense and was, but again, there's any other ways they could have dealt with trying to protect certain people.
Right.
Can we?
Let's talk about these flash forwards, because this is also what kind of just rubbed salt in the wound. I want to know really what's going on here. These teases, we're not even talking about episodes, classic Arrow. Half of your episode is in present day, half is in the past. Okay, let's introduce flash forwards. Only let's basically make them teases, really annoying. Because that moment when Maya is revealed watching the documentary, I'm like, okay, just say it. Say you're his daughter. Just say it. I just need verbal confirmation here. And then Connor comes in. Okay, Connor. I've heard that name before. Now, in present day, John does have a son, but his son's name is actually John Jr.
Right.
So is that who Connor's gonna grow up to be? Okay, that's more suspicious.
Yeah. Well,
It's just it's the little things, and again, I think part of my problem always is what I see on Twitter ahead of the actual episode sometimes usually plays a large part in how I react to it. Somebody put out there that there's a big reveal about who's in the present. Is that Connor? Because if that's the big reveal, I have a problem with whoever announced it like that, because you could have given me Felicity Smoke still alive. You could have given me Oliver Queen still alive. Like, really? We're going to settle for Connor as the big reveal?
I don't think Connor was the big reveal, and I think, and to your earlier point, I actually do think Felicity's still alive. I think she faked her death.
The way that Arrow Cave was set up?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I
was. Yeah. But now here's the problem, Will. And we've talked about this before in terms of theory spiraling. Now is Arrow gonna suffer what the Flash does, and from we're gonna tease this out, the viewers already know, so when it happens, are you gonna get that punch in the gut?
If they do it well and they don't drag it out too long, then it'll be satisfying. Because after all, I mean, you can't. But they could very well keep her dead. Or Oliver dead. I'm thinking at this juncture. Well, because let's see, where are we in a time? Have we established how far ahead they are?
Well, considering Renee's tan, hair, lack of a scar, Dinah's scar, hair, and just timeless beauty. No, they have not.
Yeah, they haven't. Yeah.
Well, Zoe's like what, 13 in present day?
Yeah, so I guess she's in her 30s in this.
Oh, she looks my age, and I'm not in my 30s.
Okay, late 20s. So maybe. Okay, so maybe they're what, 15 years in the future. Yeah. So I think I'm gonna go back, but I do think at the end of the day, I do think one of the reveals will be Felicity is alive. Maybe it's related to Dante, maybe it's not, but I think Oliver. So Oliver, this could be teasing us for what some people think will happen with the crisis.
Exactly.
Which is Oliver sacrifices himself.
And this is what, again, going into this episode, knowing what's out there, the fact that Crisis on Infinite Earth is, we know it's coming. We know somebody's going to die. We know based off of the last crossover, high likelihood it's Oliver. Mm-hmm. It's not stakes, okay? We've talked about stakes before, and I still need to figure out what it exactly is doing to the show, but it's a lack of interest for me, because you're going to kill off this character in a year. Why do I care about anything that's happening right now?
Right.
Because you've built a show around a single character who I love. Despite all of his flaws, I do. I love everything he's created around him. Mm-hmm. He's going to die next year. Okay, so why do I care not only about what's currently happening in Star City, but how it relates to where Star City ends up in 15 years? Like, the show isn't called Star City, it's called Arrow. Yeah.
I mean, that's one theory. I mean, it makes, all the signals point that way, or it could be just it could be a very solid head fake.
Right. Like they'll switch him out with Wells from another Earth, because you can kill any amount of Wells and one will pop up.
Exactly.
You're welcome. Call back to last week's episode. They did announce that another Flash character is going to die this season. I wonder if they're going to go back to that old well.
They just might. Yeah. So who do you think? Yeah, or we could yeah, we could talk about that more in another part of this episode. But
Part of me thinks it might be Cisco.
that's the odds-on favorite. People on Twitter are reacting as either Cisco or the three leaders in the clubhouse I've seen so far. Maybe I'll do a March Madness kind of poll for like we did a couple years ago with Avatar. Is who of the main characters, which one's just going to go, and just is it Cisco, is it Caitlin, or is it Joe?
Yeah, see, all three of them have come up in my mind. Part of me, and this is a weird thing to put out there, part of me wants it to be Cisco.
Yeah.
Because I feel like his character has been given such a disservice over the last few seasons, where I'm kind of like, you know what? If you have to step away because you're not getting the story arcs, you know they're not going to take your character, do it. I respect that.
Yeah.
I also, again, now if they kill off Joe, I'm kind of like, yeah, I'll miss Jesse L. Martin, but at the same time, that's not a real big character. He's been sick so much this season, he's hardly been on the show.
Yeah,
Cecile has had more screen time.
Yeah, and he has, I mean, and Joe's story has been diminishing over the recent seasons. He's become truly a secondary character. He's Quentin Lentz.
Oh, he's so Quentin Lance, except it's not even on the same level because Quentin never had another character like he didn't go off and marry Donna Smoke and she suddenly replaced him on the show. Cecile's really replaced Joe. It's bizarre.
It has been very bizarre.
I'm still writing the Wells Cecile fanfiction love story. Send me your thoughts. Yeah. And then Caitlyn's an interesting one because Killer Frost, it's part of the lore. I think it's a important character to retain.
Yeah.
Especially female.
And they're finally getting the character right. I mean, if finally, after working through all the various anti-hero machinations, and is she a meta? Is she not? They finally settled on, okay, here's going to be her backstory, and here's how we're going to handle this character. And I've been enjoying it this season. So it's going to be any one of those three makes sense. I can't see Hartley leaving. I mean, I think they're starting to build him up. Maybe finally Tom Cavanaugh will go. Not that we want our Wells to go away, but the hard part about that one is you kind of feel like I want Tom to go and all of his Wells on current Earth, but I don't want to give up Eobard Thawne. Right. Because they've pretty much decided that for now. Well, I think for forever. I think even though Matt Lester did a great job playing Thawne, I mean, at least but that was really, he was really fleshed out more on Legends than here on the Flash. So they're going to go to Harrison Wells' version of Thawne as much as they can. And maybe, he could be leaving the show, but still be a reoccurring character. So,
yeah. You don't see. That's another thing about the Flash. Like, I see a headline like that, and I'm kind of like, because we've lost so many iterations of these characters, and they can come back. There's a lack of permanency.
Yeah. Yep.
Permanency. And I don't know if that's a good or bad thing. I honestly don't. Let's just talk about this right now while we can, because it's the perfect segue in terms of so Pedowitz from CW came out and was talking about and has a quote about how things will age and we want to get to the next generation of shows to keep the CW and DC universe going for as long as possible. Mm-hmm. And on top of that, final seasons regarding the current lineup of shows will be announced in May during upfronts.
Right.
I thought it was kind of rude to specifically say, including Arrow. What?
Yeah.
It's the old dog. Doesn't mean it's going to be the first to get put down.
Exactly.
I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, everybody just assumes that, yeah. I mean, yes, ratings have declined, but
So has the Flash.
So has the Flash. So has Supergirl. So, well, actually, they've had a little bump up this season. Legends is just like the little show that could. Black Lightning. I know the Cancel Bear was had it on life support a few times, but it seems like okay, they got renewed for a third season.
Mm-hmm.
So again, getting back to our discussion about Arrow, all the signs, the way they're doing the story, they could set this things up with Infinite Crisis to end the show. They could.
Right. So we're going to get an 8th season, but only half of what we would normally get.
Right. Or yeah, pretty much. If they decide to if they do a half season, like 13 episodes or something like that to close out Arrow, which is very possible given that we know that Batwoman is gone to pilot. I think they're starting to film. Is it this month or next? I think next month with with series order in May. So it makes sense. They the way the calendar is working out, they could very well do that. And Batwoman just be a mid-season replacement for Arrow.
Yeah. See, and this goes back to our Arrow discussion. Again, it bothers me knowing that there's all of these possibilities, and that's a likelihood route that this could go into. But we have 15 years to cover between what they've been teasing for 13 episodes now in the future and what currently is. Like, that's a huge gap.
It is.
What kind of information dump is going to be dropped on us within the next few episodes? And that's the only thing that scares me, that while we know Crisis on Infinite Earth is coming, we know Batwoman is coming, we know that you can only have so many vigilantes running around on the network.
Yeah, even though Pedowitz said he doesn't feel they've reached saturation point yet, but looking at what's happened with Netflix and even with their Marvel Universe and how it has, their seasons 2 and 3 have dropped off. And there's so many other options out there, like the DC app. There's Disney's going to be having their app, CBS All Access. Netflix are putting the Marvel shows to rest, but they're putting things out like the Umbrella Academy, and you have sci-fi out there with Krypton and other things. So the marketplace is getting pretty saturated, and these shows are starting to show their age creatively. I think Arrow has had a renaissance. I think it's fair to say, with blowing up the writers' room, and they're come up with some fresh things this season. But who knows? I mean, Arrow could end up being like Supernatural, where we're
No.
7 years from now we could still be talking about Arrow, but I doubt they'll go that long, because how much, I guess, creatively you have to figure out where's the right place to end this.
Season 10.
Yeah, you hope. Yeah, you hope. I mean, you hope 10 years would be a good, solid, round number.
Clark Kent's got 10 years. Why can't Oliver Queen? That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, exactly.
It sounds fair.
It sounds very fair. It sounds very fair. You should give the flagship the full 10.
I agree with you. I agree that it's gonna hit. We thought it had already spiked back in season 4 or season 5, even though season 5 brought its whole. Season 5 really put Arrow back on the map for me, at least. Season 4 and season 3 were a bit iffy. Only thing kept me going was Felicity, and that ship. I'll die on that ship. Flash. Its age is starting to run on me as well, because we keep having the same issues. The same issues come up time and time again with that show and the stories. And I was thinking about it before we got on tonight. I was thinking about, is really what the CW proving that these shows really work with a shorter series run. Are we not thinking correctly when back a few decades ago everybody was like, well, obviously comic books work better on TV than in movies because they are serialized. This is the perfect format to have weekly episodes, just like you would get weekly books. But there's a difference here because we're talking about production. We're talking about people not just stretching storylines over the course of one episode or one issue, but multiple issues. And it's not like you can kill everybody and come out with a new run next year. No, you have to keep it going. You have to keep the momentum. And these shows, I'm not seeing it like anyone really pull it off. Even Smallville had its issues. And so I'm wondering, is this really just proving us wrong that no, if you're going to do a comic book show, it's got to be 5 seasons max?
Yeah, it could be. Well, and I think too, you could have a long run, but I do think if you're going to do that, you have to have some creative turnover, and switch things up. And if you look at any successful series, many times that will happen, and you either a shift in the executive producers, or you blow up the writers' room and bring in some fresh people, fresh writers to. Even if you do have at the very top of the chain, the same EPs, you have new writers. But I look at, and I'm going to take this moment to enjoy a Sarah moment of actually saying, "Hey, Star Trek may have something." So I will take Star Trek for example. I think for this is a franchise that had on it in the mid to late 90s, 3 shows running concurrently. You had Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager, and then Enterprise. And the one constant throughout was the same executive producer, Rick Berman, and Brandon Braga. And by Enterprise, that they had just run out of juice and energy. Not only because they had all these series going, but also they were doing the movies as well with the Next Generation cast, and I think they just got spread way too thin. And the one show that stands out to me in that run is Deep Space Nine, in that they creatively decided in the 3rd season to completely blow things up and shake things up, and yes, bring a starship onto the show, because we realized just being trapped on a space station, you can't go but so far creatively with that.
Right.
And it breathed new life into that show, and to me, really, it's still my favorite Star Trek to date. Now, Discovery is gaining fast. It's been very solid season and a half, but that's what you need to do. And I think what was brought up with the CW DC Universe shows, to bring it back to our current discussion, is they may need to do that. So when I see main character will be leaving the Flash this season, I'm like, okay, that might be a good thing. Or, like what Arrow did, where when Wendy and Mark moved on, and they brought Beth Schwartz on board, which another little hat I liked in the story was Dr. Schwartz. That was a good move on the part of the CW to shake things up, to give this show some additional life and additional legs, which hopefully does help it stretch out to 10 years. But it wouldn't surprise me at this point that the way they're going creatively, they do end it after 8 big seasons.
Right. I'm just going to leave it on this. I've heard from multiple people that Deep 6-9 is one of the better, if not the best, seasons of Star Trek, series of Star Trek, however you want to phrase it. I think for the writers, just remember you're telling a story, and it's not stories. It's It's not saga. It's a tell me a story. And if that story starts in episode 1 and ends in episode 7, then okay, you can make a sequel.
Yeah.
it just got to be a cohesive arc. I mean, this Game of Thrones, it's a huge story. And yet they're stretching over 8 seasons. Granted, their last season was what, 6 episodes?
Yeah.
Few hours. The season 8 is going to be 6 episodes, and basically the last 2 or 4 are hour and a half long episodes. It's like a mini movies, and because they are going to finish telling the story that they started all the way back in the first season. And I think a lot of shows and writers can learn from how they structured that saga, and to tell all of those different stories and everything. And with these characters, like, there's only one Barry Allen, there's one Oliver Queen. That means there's one story, and that's what we're interested in.
Yep.
I think that there's too many distractions, but let's pull in Patricia, because talking about shows and cancellations and seasons 2s and everything, we got to talk about Punisher.
All right, let's pull her in.
All right. So let's talk about the Punisher season 2. Yeah. I forget 95% of it, Patricia. So tell me what I should remember about the Punisher season 2.
Okay, you should remember Frank's walk.
Check.
Yep, that's it. No, I just always remember our conversation about Frank's walk, and how. Anyway, but yeah.
I do know how, and I understand completely. Will is completely confused, which is a must on this show. So you're right on track.
Yeah,
I'm right on cue.
I'm
awesome.
lost. So educate me and the listeners who may not know this inside story here.
No.
Meanie?
Well, I think to start off, there's so many different little side storylines that are going on, and it gets sort of convoluted, as life does. And I just love all the different themes that come out of the show. And like we talked about the first Punisher season, I think they've done a beautiful job at describing all these different versions and portraying all of these different versions of what people go through with PTSD. And they haven't left any stone unturned with this, because every character on the show has a different type or a different event. It may be war, it may be family, it may be, being a cop, it may be being a victim. They all have different versions of PTSD. And so that's the thing that I love about this show the most. And I felt like overall the show was really well organized too, at least for me. And one thing that I thought was funny, I think, Sarah, you'll appreciate this, is that as I was binge watching it, I realized that there was a different writer and there was a different director for almost every single episode, and yet it didn't feel like a different writer or a different director. And I started noticing that on some other shows too, like Daredevil, and I was like, they did a really good job at piecing it all together. So I appreciated how smooth the change of director for each episode was. I don't know if that's normal for TV shows though. So I'm a total noob saying this.
No, well, what typically happens is they have a writer's room. So, and they break out the overall season arcs, and then 1 or 2 writers get assigned each episode, along with a director. And it's more common to have different directors for every single episode of the show. Only a few directors, like Sam Esmail for Mr. Robot and Homecoming, he directed all of those episodes. Mr. Robot season 1 he didn't. fully direct seasons 2 and 3 and season 4, which should be arriving any day now. He directed all the episodes, so that's actually more uncommon than what you're referring to, which is pretty normal.
Oh, okay. Well, I got knowledge dropped on me. But either way, I think it's amazing that people can, like, so many different directors, they make it real smooth. Congrats, guys. You did a good job.
No, it like not to undermine that, but you're absolutely right. Like, I spend a lot of time watching these shows and being like, oh, this is clearly a different director and this doesn't feel cohesive. And so to know that not only that they have sent different directors but different writers behind it and have one cohesive story like that, it really is a good achievement for a show, because sometimes it is very noticeable and distracting.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'll just like sort of talk, like, my two favorite episodes of the entire show was the one, I think it was episode 3 or 4, where they were stuck in the cop shop in Larkville, and
Mm-hmm.
John Preacher was on the outside and they were being fired upon, and then like, Frank is like, you better set me loose, sheriff. Like, that was my favorite episode because he had like, Frank, like, that theme of that episode, Frank is telling them, like, and telling the girl Amy, which we find out her name is later, but he's telling her, like, you can't run forever. You want to see what's coming at you, so you got to run at it. You got to be on the defense and the offense. And if you're on offense, it's better for your defense, basically, is what he's saying. But what's funny is that when he's running through the woods playing offense and knocking all those guys off, the preacher man is coming after him, and he's so focused on the offense part that he didn't realize that the preacher man was coming after him until the very last second. And then all of a sudden Madani was there, like his little guardian angel, of course. And so even though you're playing offense and you're bringing the fight to your oppressors, you still have to watch your back. And I just thought, like, that theme of the whole show was, I mean, just really eye-opening to me, I guess.
To go off your point about Madani, I think that this is one of the bigger controversial parts of the season 2, is that majority of the viewers were not on board with her actions, because she, in season 1, she was such a badass in the sense that she was a cop. She knew her goal, she knew her target, and then yes, she was manipulated, but she didn't see it. And so this season, she's coming at it from a place of PTSD and still dealing with, how could I be so stupid? And now that I find myself in this position, suddenly I can't tell right from wrong, maybe.
Yep.
I'm more aligned with you, Patricia. I felt like Madani, the dynamic between Madani, Frank, and Jigsaw, I'm forgetting his real name, it was really good. I enjoyed it while I was watching it. Of course, none of it, and this is what I find so interesting, none of it stuck with me. I watched this the weekend it dropped, and a majority of it did not stick with me following, like 4 weeks later. And that's a bad sign, because I would have hoped some of it would be more like, I can totally go back to that moment. I know exactly what the characters were doing. I want to rewatch the season. I don't have that drive at all. The only episode I've rewatched multiple times is the castle episode, and we all know why.
Yeah. No, I loved Madani's storyline through this series because, like I said, she's coming from a place of her own PTSD, and everybody experiences PTSD in such a different way. And whether or not other people understand it, the person has to understand their PTSD and try to work on it in a way that works for them. And that's
Mhm.
like when Madani went to Curtis's, I can't remember which episode it is, but Madani went to Curtis's support group,
Yep.
and the one guy was like, "Well, I don't know what you're doing here, lady. Like, where are you here for research or blah blah blah?" And then she has her little blurb about like, "Well, what, you don't think I know what it feels like to be this or do this or experience that?" And I was just like, "Yeah." Now what, buddy? Like, I was totally in Madani's corner in that moment, and I loved it. And it's just that eye-opening thing that people, it doesn't matter how big or how small. Like Amy, she didn't really go through something as dramatic as even Madani, like Stein dying in her arms and being betrayed and stuff. She didn't go to war. She just, it was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and she happened to see all of her friends' dead bodies in a hotel room. And that can cause PTSD, especially for a character that's as young as that she is. I mean, it could be as simple as your cat dying. It could be as simple as, falling down at the store. I don't know, but whatever PTSD that you have, there's just so many different things that you have to do to deal with it. And I think this, like I've said, and I know I'm repeating myself, the show does a really nice job of showing that. And it's just really cool.
Right. No, you're spot on, Patricia, with all of this. I think what you're also getting at is more that we all have our own trauma, and some of it is loud and nasty, and it's much more painful, but others, it's not that they don't experience trauma. It's just, and it's not even that it's minimal. It's just different. It's unique. And I think, and if you think about just in terms of people growing and the everybody has their own trauma, and that's what makes them who they are, and will continue to make them who they are, because we all have trauma at different stages of our life. And you're right on that this show takes that and puts it, because of the events of season 1, is able to capture not just through Frank's eye, but through the eye of everyone he interacted with since coming home, because that scene stuck out to me too in the support group, because soldiers come home and feel out of place because suddenly they're not on the war front. Suddenly they're not in that routine and in that soldier mentality. But from Madani's perspective, she's like, the war doesn't stop just because you're home. We fight a war here too. It's just in a very different way. And that assimilation is hard on people, especially soldiers. Another thing, we got to talk about this, Patricia. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Another reason why I don't like season 2. I never got a kiss between Frank and Karen. And I'm really upset about it, and I have my own PTSD from it. It is the most unfulfilled promise I have ever seen a TV show do. I am still deeply hurt. I wanted to shoot Amy the moment she walked into that room. How dare she?
So something did stick with you.
Yeah, I told you, like, that episode I've watched multiple times, because that episode about broke me, and about broke Frank, and when he brought up Daredevil, how dare he?
Right.
I have to admit, I did think of you whenever I was watching that episode, because I knew it was just like, I could imagine you like throwing all kinds of things at the screen.
I was so engaged, and Karen. Now here's the question: do you guys really think, honestly, that Karen was there to sacrifice everything for him, or was that just the heat of the moment?
Um, I'm not as invested as you two, so I'll just toss it out. I think it was just heat of the moment. Um, and so it was, yeah. I mean, I think that was her motivations. You know, but again, I'm not as invested, so I could be way wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay, so I have to tell you that I had not watched Daredevil season 3 before I watched this season. So after I finished season 2 of Punisher, then I was curious as to why Frank was like, well, does Murdoch know you're here? Like, or is he happy that you're here or whatever? I think that I hate to disappoint you. I love the idea of Castle being a thing. Trust me, I do. But I think ultimately it's a deeper relationship. It's not a romantic relationship. It's more of like, okay, so like I know Frank and Billy have talked about this, about being overseas, and they have their brotherhood of their unit, and that's their family. And here, like being at home, their unit is so close knit, you know, Karen, Foggy, Matt, and Frank was a big part of that. And so I feel like it's more of that kind of a relationship, like a really, really strong friendship that, yeah, I'm here and I will sacrifice what I need to make sure that you're safe. Because she's always felt that connection with Frank, even in the Daredevil and the first season of Punisher, like she's always had this special connection that she knows that he is a good guy. And so that's what I think it is. I think it's their version of a being a military unit, that brotherhood-esque feeling. And Frank hasn't found that with many other people.
Right.
Did I just destroy things for you? I'm sorry.
No, no, it's not that you destroyed things. The Raiders destroyed things because they didn't fulfill. I just don't like being teased, guys. If you're gonna have those two characters make hard eyes at each other for multiple seasons, and basically not state that they love each other, but imply.
Mhm.
Um, why not a little peck, a little goodbye kiss, huh? Huh? What about that? What about a little bit moment? Okay, we've had two moments now in the elevator and in the doctor's room. So yeah, Castle. I don't know. Um, so this is the last season, right, of the Punisher?
Is it the last season of The Punisher? I mean, I think they did a pretty good job of like summing everything up. And if it is the last season, they didn't leave anything hanging. So I wouldn't be mad if it was the last season. I would just be disappointed as a viewer because I love.
I will, I haven't said much about the Punisher. Like you, Patricia, the episode that stands out for me was definitely the one where they were at the police station in that little town. Felt like that was most three
It was like
dimensional.
the whole season
Yeah,
compacted into one little moment.
yeah, it was the most three dimensional I felt, and also, admittedly, I'm not a big fan of either of seasons 1 or 2 as far as the shows, but I have to give kudos to John Barenthal. His portrayal and passion for that character is the one thing that kept me engaged to make it through the end. If and as someone who is not as invested in the show as others are, that was what kept me around. I did enjoy his portrayal of Frank, um, but I do think that if trends hold with what's going on with the Netflix shows with the Marvel Universe on Netflix, this was it. But again, I think it was a satisfying end, if it is indeed the end for this show.
The I mean, that makes me sad. But the other thing I wanted to bring up about trauma that I just thought of was, you know how in the very beginning, I think it was like the second episode, Frank goes to visit Curtis, his war buddy, Frank wanted Billy to live with the guilt and knowing that Frank messed up his face and that he had done all this stuff and that's what he was going to have to live with for, the rest of his life. But ironically, he doesn't remember anything, and so everybody else has to live with it except for Billy. Anyway, I thought that was a really cool concept that they pulled in.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if Sarah, if you had any ideas or had anything to say about that.
Well,
And
it
how
wasn't.
everybody around him has to deal with what Billy did. Like, do you think Billy actually lost his mind, or do you think he actually remembered?
It goes to your theme of trauma. I think he probably blacked it out, because if he did indeed remember, it would have just, and maybe it did. I mean, that was that subconscious thing that was sort of trapped back there that just kept driving him for this revenge, and that was those motivations, because he did indeed have on its subconscious Frank beating the crap out of him at the end of season 1.
No, I just wanted to ask the question, like, did you guys think that he lost his mind, or did you guys think that he actually remembered?
I don't know. I honestly don't, and I think maybe that's one of the strengths of the writing, is that you don't know for sure. Depending on how you're looking at it, he was really screwed up at the end of season 1. I don't think he should have lived, and honestly, I was more distracted by the fact that, are you kidding me? They're going to call him Jigsaw, and he has a few red lines on his face. He wasn't that disturbing looking. That really bothered me, and I really hated that aspect so much that it took me a while to get used to it and kind of focus on, okay, they're doing something interesting with him psychologically. Maybe I should focus on that rather than how his physical changes don't match up to what it should be, in terms of who his character represents. Yeah. And plus, I would be really mad if I was Frank and I was like, I screwed up his face. I took his life away from him. Now he has like 3 scars on his face. What the heck?
Yeah.
My whole family died, and that was my justice. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. What did you think of the psychologist that was working with Billy Russo, that they were going to run away together and she was afraid of heights?
She used to play on Supergirl. She was Alex's lover for a full season, and that's what I thought about. And I thought about the fact that this is going to be really random. The pencil skirts. And I was like, okay, so all girls have that little stomach poke out there. Okay, I shouldn't feel so. I don't know. I liked it until I didn't like it. I liked it as something I did not expect coming into the season. And then I didn't like it the moment that they started to really get involved. And I was like, this is moving way too fast. They're both psychos. I understand her family trauma. That's kind of interesting, but at the same time, she's really screwed up in the head, and I was too focused on the castle situation at that point.
Yeah, I didn't trust her character from the beginning. Like, I didn't like her character from the beginning. I was like, nah, there's something wrong with her. There's something wrong with her. Like, I had my suspicions from the moment that you met the character. And I was like, it's going to end bad. And sure enough, it did. And I'm really surprised that, like, she's still alive, 1. And 2, I wonder if they're going to do anything with that. But I highly doubt it. But anyway, I had a bad feeling about her the entire time. So that was my thing. I don't know, but she did a good job as an actress playing the part.
She's a really good actress. She's also in a relationship with Casey Affleck. Why I know this, I don't know, and why I'm telling you guys, I don't know.
Random
I didn't
thoughts.
put her together for Alex's girlfriend, and now that you've said that, I'm like, oh, you're right. But anyway,
Yeah, they were committed, and then she broke her heart and ran off with Jigsaw.
yep.
That'll do it. That'll do it.
Should
Man.
have been the other way around. I don't know. It's just, yeah. I find it interesting you went back to watch Daredevil season 3 because that show, knowing it was going to get canceled, it kind of ended on a very, hey, we're all happy now note. And this show did it similarly.
Yeah.
And it kind of bothers me because it's so early on in these runs to be closing the book on these characters, and so that's the only redeeming part of what happened between Karen and Frank. It's kind of like, yeah, they're not going to be, and you know what? I'll argue it right now. Matt and Karen won't be because
No.
Matt and Karen didn't get back together at the end of season 3. Okay, and also if they would have, she would have gotten killed because Matt always gets Karen killed in the end. That's it for us tonight, people.
Mic drop. Matt always kills Karen, and Karen never kisses Frank. Done.
Okay, you didn't have to add in the last part. How dare you, woman? Why don't you tell our listeners where they can find you on Twitter to criticize you about bringing that up?
You can find me on Twitter and tell me all about your castle problems at prmiller20.
Will, where can they find you?
You can find me at Will M Polk, WILLMPOLK.
And you can find me at SJ Belmont, SJBELMONT. Please follow our crew on Twitter at CNN Nerd. Friend us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, but most importantly, rate, subscribe, and comment on iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, and YouTube. Good night, Geek Out. You're welcome.